There we go. Okay, so I'm going to back up so that we get all this recorded. Okay, so we'll start this over again. Oops.
Amateur radio, also known as ham radio, is a popular service and hobby that enables so many activities, from public service to scientific experimentation to sheer fun. With more than 740,000 practitioners in the U.S. and 1.75 million worldwide, there are federally licensed amateur radio operators everywhere, in your neighborhood, in your workplace, and in your schools. People just like you use ham radio to communicate without relying on the internet or a cell phone network, and it can go wherever you go. You can hike a trail, climb a mountain, or paddle a river, and take your radio with you. Ham radio even reaches as far as outer space. Ham radio operators can talk to astronauts aboard the International Space Station, talk to other operators through satellites orbiting Earth, and even bounce their radio signals off the moon and back. The amateur radio service is a valued element of neighborhoods and municipalities across the U.S. In times of disaster, when regular communications channels fail, the amateur radio service works with public service agencies such as FEMA, the American Red Cross, and the Salvation Army to assist emergency communications efforts. Amateurs can also use their radios to volunteer within their communities, providing communications for events like county fairs, parades, and road races. Although people get involved with amateur radio for many reasons, they all pass a test to earn the Federal Communications Commission license that shows they have a basic knowledge of the principles of electricity, radio technology, and operating rules. This knowledge has practical everyday applications that educators have used to teach science, technology, engineering, and math concepts. Lots of hams got into the hobby as kids and followed their interest in radio to exciting careers as astronauts, engineers, pilots, and more. The ham radio frequencies begin just above the AM broadcast band and extend into extremely high microwave frequencies. Ham radio operators use these frequencies to communicate with each other using microphones, Morse code, and even by interfacing a radio with a computer or tablet to send data, text, or images. Some compete in contests, trying to make the most radio contacts within a certain time frame. Amateur radio has been around for over 100 years, and the technology behind it continues to evolve and advance today. Operators are always finding new ways to explore amateur radio, experimenting with digital applications of this technology through things like coding, mobile apps, and drones. To learn more about the endless possibilities of amateur radio, where the technology is headed, and how you can get involved, visit ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, at www.arrl.org.
Okay, now we're on track. Okay, so as I mentioned, this ARRL, the Amateur Radio Relay League, they are the governing agency that oversees all ham radio operations. We do comply with FCC rules, but basically what the FCC says is we don't care what you do as long as you stay within your frequency bands and don't interfere with anybody else. So the ham radio has developed our own set of rules that we abide by, which is probably more than what the FCC requires. But anyway, we're gonna learn more about that as we go along. The mission statement for the ARRL, I was gonna print it on here, but it's like 6 pages long. So I just kind of summarized it. The purpose of ham radio is for public service, advocacy, education, technology, and membership. Those are primarily the things that we work on with ham radio. Okay, many of you probably are getting into ham radio because you want an emergency form of communications. And that's a good thing. That's what a lot of people are doing. And you know, in the event of a disaster, typically the first thing that goes out is your cell phone. People don't realize that. They think, oh, I've got a cell phone, I can always communicate. Well, actually, you probably can't. And the reason for that is these cell phone towers, you see them all over everywhere. Each one of those towers costs probably $2 million to build one tower with all the equipment that's in it. And it's a lot of money. It's a huge investment. And so they need to recoup those funds. So to do that, they overload the system. I mean, they grossly overload it, probably by 20% more than what the system can handle, because they want it busy all the time, 24 hours a day, because that's where they make their money. It's basically airtime. So the more airtime you have, the more money that you're going to spend on it. So in the event of a disaster, there's a good possibility that your cell phone may not work. In fact, if you've ever had an occasion, if you go to dial a phone number and you push send and you wait and wait and wait and wait, and then finally it connects. Well, what it's waiting for is all the channels are busy and it's waiting for something to clear so that you can connect. Or sometimes if you dial a number and push send and you wait and wait and wait, and then it just disconnects. And that means that the system is busy, all the channels are busy, and it just disconnected you. So you have to try again. Or sometimes if you're ever talking on a cell phone in the middle of a conversation for no apparent reason, it just suddenly disconnects. Well, the reason for that is there are some people who have priority. For example, like public safety, emergency services, critical government operations, their cell phones have priority. So if an ambulance driver needs to make a phone call and all the channels are busy, well, somebody gets booted off so that they can make their phone call. I mean, that's how busy the system is. And if you get a huge disaster happening, now all of a sudden you've got 3 or 4 times as many people trying to connect, and the system just can't handle it. So your chances of getting a call out is next to nothing. So we need an alternative. We need something else that we can rely on. And that's why, or that's one of the reasons why we do ham radio. And it serves as a great emergency communication system. And we have all kinds of organizations all over the county, the state, even nationwide, where we have what we call nets, where we organize into groups for emergency communication purposes. Okay, this is my call sign. It's KE7VMN, and hopefully by the end of this course, we'll get you one of those. And actually, these numbers and letters do mean something. So I'm going to show you. Okay, the first letter, that actually comes way back in the early days in the 1800s when ham radio, first started happening. They divided the country by east and west, and they used the Mississippi River as the division between the west and the east. Well, in those days, the west was very sparsely populated. So population-wise, that was a pretty good division. Well, now the west is all grown up and populated, and it's bigger than the east. So the division between east and west is the Mississippi River is not a good line anymore. But anyway, everything west of the Mississippi River starts with the letter K. And if you noticed, even the commercial, like television and radios, all of the television stations, they all start with the letter K. KKIX, KVAR, KREM, they all start with the letter K. And likewise, ours will start with the letter K as well. Now, if you live east of the Mississippi River, then yours will start with the letter W. Everything east always begins with a W. So that's what the first letter designates. Now the second letter actually will increment, and I'm going to come back to that as I show you the rest of it. Now this third, okay, these two characters here in the front, these two letters in the front, we call that the prefix. Everything ahead of the number is a prefix, and these are valid prefixes. And you can start with any of those. Now, once you get your license, if you want to, you don't have to, but if you want to, you can apply for what's called a vanity license, where you can make up your own license. You can use your initials, you can use, a call sign that your grandfather had, or you can just, there's a pool of call signs available if you want to just pick one out. So if you want to, you can do that. But the first letters have to start with either letter K or N or W or AA through AL and KA through KZ and so forth. Those are all valid prefixes for your call sign. Now the third one is a number, and every call sign has a number. You have to have one number. That number designates where you live. The country is divided up into 10 areas or 10 zones, and depending on where you live will determine what that number will be. So even if you have a vanity call sign, that number will still be designated by where you live. Here, everything in the western part of the country except California is all zone 7. And I'm going to show you a map in just a little bit. Okay, now the next 3 letters increment with every new license that comes out. So mine was VMN. The next person who got their license was VMM. And then the next one is VMO and VMP and so forth. And it just keeps incrementing. And once it gets all the way up to ZZZ, then this letter up front, this letter E, will advance to the letter F. And then it starts all over with AAA and AAB and AAC and so forth, and just keeps incrementing. Now, those are what we call the FCC licenses. And right now, I think, see, I got mine about 20 years ago. So right now, I think we're in the KK range. This letter here is KK. So when you get your license, it'll probably be KK7 and then whatever the last 3 digits are. Let's see. Okay, this is called the suffix. Now, in your license, if you decide to get a vanity license, you have to have at least one letter in the prefix, and then a number, and at least one letter in the suffix. And you can have a maximum of 2 here and 3 here. So there's some rules on what you can do. Oops. Okay, there we go. Okay, here's the map and how it's broken up. And if you look, the Mississippi River runs right down through here. And everything east of the Mississippi are really small areas, because back in the 1800s, this was highly populated, and the West had hardly any population at all. So these areas out here are huge. So this is zone 7. For those of you that are in Idaho and Washington, your call sign is going to have the letter 7 because you're in zone 7. Okay, these are vanity call signs if you choose that you want to do it. These are just some samples. This is a friend of mine. His name is Bob. It's K7RDN. RDN is his initials. So that's pretty common. People will just have K7 and then their initials. Here's another one, N7DH, and DH is his initials. But these are all vanity call signs. So if you want to, you can do that. Most people just use the FCC call sign, which is what mine is. Okay, a common question that I hear all the time is, first of all, why do I need a license? All I want to do is talk on the radio. And why do I need all this technical stuff? Well, there's a couple of reasons. Part of it is tradition, because ham radio was literally the invention of all radio. Two-way radio, radio television, AM, FM radios, ham radio. The ham radio people were the inventor of that way back in the 1800s. And the reason they call it amateur is because back in those days, nobody ever thought that this radio stuff would ever amount to anything. They thought it was just a silly waste of time. And so they referred to the people as amateurs because they like to play around with this radio stuff. But yeah, they were literally the inventors of it. And so the tradition has been passed on that we want ham radio operators to at least be familiar with the technical part of it. Now, when I was young, the big thing with ham radio is you built your own radio. You go down to Radio Shack, you buy this aluminum box, buy this big, and you drill some holes in it, you put some vacuum tube sockets in it, and solder some wires and components, and you literally built your own radio. That was what it was all about. Well, in today's world, the technology is so far advanced that that's impossible to do. You can't build your own radio anymore. But we still want you to at least have a basic understanding of what radios are, how they work, and how it does what it does. So they want you to at least, and actually, as far as this class is concerned, if you ever hear a conversation over the radio where they're talking about the local oscillator or the phase lock loop system or the power amp or something like that, and if you can do nothing more than just sit up and say, "Ha, I know what that is," then we've done our job. That's all we want you to do, is just be familiar with it. Just kind of to hear it and know what it is. Not that you'll ever use it, but it's a good thing to know. It's kind of fun to know how radios work. And I'm going to show you later on in some of the classes actually how a radio works, how it does what it does, and all that fun stuff. Okay, now the licensing, there are actually 3 levels of license. The technician, which is the one we're working on right now, that's the entry level license. And that's kind of the beginning. That's the basic one. The general is a medium level license. A little more difficult to get. The test is harder. And then the extra is the highest level. And as you get higher licenses, you have more privileges. There's more things you can do, more power that you can use, more types of radios that you can use. So some people like to advance, but it's not necessary. If you're just wanting it for emergency communications and just be able to talk to friends and neighbors, and the technician is probably all you need. But the others are available if you'd like to do it. We have a lot of people that get their technician license, and after a few years, they're thinking, you know what? I think I'd kind of like to get the general. I think that'd be kind of fun. So they study real hard and get their general license, and some of them get the extra, and that one's really hard. But I have had, over the years that I've been teaching these classes, I've had probably 4 or 5 people who took the technician license and passed, and then immediately took the general test and passed that, and then immediately took the extra and passed that one. Got all 3 of them in one night, which is an incredible feat. I couldn't even do that, but it is doable. Okay, the technician class license, and that's the only license we're really going to cover in this class, is the technician level. It's the entry level, the basic. The license itself can be divided into 3 general categories. There's the rules and regulations, and that's going to be by far the biggest part of it. You're going to have more questions on rules and regulations than anything else. But I'm not going to cover very much of that in class, because you can read that. I'm going to give you assignments in the book, and you can read that each week. Now there's the technical portion, and that's the part that most people struggle with. The technical is not as big. There's not much of it, but most people this is like a foreign language to them. So I'm going to focus mostly on the technical part of it, because, like I say, that's where most people struggle with it. And then there's a practical application, which is basically just common sense stuff. And that's a very small section of the license. So those are kind of the general categories for it. Now, Morse code. People have a lot of questions about that. Morse code is no longer required. Years ago, you had to be able to send and receive Morse code, so many words per minute, but that's no longer the case. Now, there are a lot of people that do Morse code. In fact, we even have Morse code classes. There's some people that teach those classes. So if you're interested in getting into Morse code, it's out there and people do use it. It's kind of fun if you learn how to do it. Okay, now first of all, you don't need a license to listen. You can listen to anything you want to listen to. The FCC rule says that you can listen to anything that you have the capability of listening to. So if somebody doesn't want you listening to their conversation, it's up to them to make it so that you can't receive it. They'll either encrypt it, or they'll put some kind of code on it or something so that you can't listen to it unless you know the code. So if you can turn it on and if you can listen to a conversation, you can listen to it. There's no rule against that. So I would encourage you to go ahead and get a radio, get it programmed up and just listen. Listen to the ham radio traffic, listen to what they do and what they say, and listen to how they do it. You'll learn a lot just by listening over the air. So it's a lot of fun. And if you need somebody to help you program it, there's a lot of people out there that have programming software and cables, and they can get it programmed up for you. So so that you can listen to all the local channels. Okay. Did we skip something? I got a blank screen in there. Okay, there's a term, we call it SWL, and that means a shortwave listener. Oops, I got another person coming in. When we hold our nets, we do these nets quite often. It's called an NET. It's a short for network. And we have these, where basically people just check in. There's not a lot of traffic on it. In fact, if you were here earlier, I checked into the Cars Club net just before the class started. And that's something you can do. But the shortwave listener is if you have somebody in your room or your house that's listening to the radio, you can check them in as an SWL, so shortwave listener. In fact, I was going to actually check all of you in as shortwave listeners, but there's way too many. It would take a long time to do that. So I just told him, well, put down about 50. That should cover it. Okay, there's another term called 2-meter monitor, and that basically means the same thing. 2-meter is one of the frequency bands that's very popular in two-way radio or ham radio. And a 2-meter monitor is just somebody that's listening. In fact, a lot of these nets, if you don't have a license, you can listen to the net and you can log in through email or even a text message. Quite often they do accept that. So, if you're listening to the net and want to log in, just they'll usually tell you where you can send an email or where you can send a text and log in. There's another term called XYL monitor. I don't know where the XYL came from, but that basically means your spouse. If you're married, it could be your husband or your wife. And if they're listening to the net, sometimes you'll say, well, I have an XYL monitor. That means it's your spouse. The Cars Club, which is the club that sponsors this class that we're doing, they have an email where you can check in. If you're listening to the net, you can check in on this email here and submit it, and they'll get you on the log. Okay, this is not the manual. This is the old manual. But anyway, this is the manual that we're going to be using for this class. I need to update that. We're on the 5th edition now, but it looks similar to this. There are lots of different manuals out there, and they're all good manuals, but this is the official ARRL study guide. So we're going to use this one in our class. Having a hard time changing. There we go. Okay, the way the testing goes, there's a question pool of 600 questions. They're all multiple choice. Each one has 4 choices for an answer. And when you take the test, you will get a pretty much random selection of 35 of those questions. But you don't know which 35 you're going to get. And if you're taking the test live in a classroom type setting, the person next to you will probably have a different test than you do. So don't look at their paper. So anyway, this question pool, and this is another way to study. Here's a sample, and I'm gonna send you each a copy of the question pool. I was gonna do it, but this is the old one from last year. So the way that works, over here in the corner, like this T1A02, okay, that's basically the question number. It's section T, group 1, question number A, or subgroup A, and question number 2. Okay, this letter C in the parentheses here is the correct answer. So for this question, the letter C is the correct answer. And this in brackets right here, this 97.1, that's where you can go to the FCC rules and regulations and find where this comes from. So if you want to do any background search on it. What I tell people, and a lot of people will just use this for a study guide. And when you get this, if you want to print it out, just take a marking pen. Oh, it won't work on this. But anyway, just take a marking pen and mark out all of the incorrect answers. Say A and B, just mark that out, and D, so that the only one you could see is letter C. So you read this question and you read this answer, and it kind of sticks in your mind because you don't see the other answers. So if you want to use that for study guide or study method, that works really good. In fact, when I took my test, that's all I did. I just looked at some of the questions and answers and went and took the test. Okay, and like I say, I'm going to send you the entire 600 question pool as soon as I get it downloaded. Okay, the agency that we operate under is called the FCC. That's the Federal Communications Commission. And a lot of people are kind of intimidated by that. The FCC is not a law enforcement. And the FCC does not monitor. Years ago, they used to have a van that went around. They periodically just monitor communications to make sure that everybody's in compliance and make sure your transmitter is on frequency and so forth. But there's too much now. They don't have the manpower to do that. So they do not monitor. However, they will respond to a complaint. If somebody complains that you're interfering with their radio system, they will respond to that. So they're not a police force. That's not their purpose. They basically do all of the paperwork, the regulations, the licensing. They keep track of all the licenses, and issued licenses and so forth. That's primarily what they do. Now, ham radio is considered a self-regulating organization. We basically police ourselves. So if you're doing something or saying something on the radio that's not appropriate, typically 1 or 2 or 3 other ham radio operators will call your attention to that. So in that aspect, we are monitored, but it's just by our friends and neighbors. And usually they're pretty good. I mean, they don't get mean or nasty about it. Just bring it to your attention and say, hey, we don't do that on the air. But like I say, if somebody files a complaint, say like the police department files a complaint and says, hey, I got this ham radio operator, he keeps bleeding over onto our channel and he's messing up our communications. Well, the FCC typically will send me a letter and say, we got a report that you're messing up somebody's communication. You need to stop it immediately. And usually that'll take care of it. If I say, oh, okay, I didn't know I was doing that and I'll fix it, I'll, do whatever I have to do. But if it continues and they get another complaint, then they're going to send a very serious letter, probably certified letter saying, look, this is the second complaint that we've had on you. If you don't stop doing it, here's the possible options. You could get a fine, you could go to jail, you could, get your license taken away from you, you could get your equipment taken away from you. So all those options. So it gets pretty serious. And then if they get a third complaint, again, for the same person, then they'll send somebody out and they'll knock on your door, probably with a search warrant, and say, okay, no, look, this is the third time now. We need to see your equipment. And they have the option. They can revoke your license. They can take away all of your equipment. They can issue a fine. They can even put you in jail. I mean, those are all options. It could be one or multiple of those. But they don't come threatening with every little complaint. Most of the time, a single letter is all it takes and the problem goes away. Okay, now there's a thing called an FRN, and this is going to be your first homework assignment for this week. This is an FCC registration number, and you have to have this number in order to take the test. Basically, it's your account. You're going to go into the FCC database and you're going to create an account for you. And then when your license comes, it will go into that account. And it's basically you just fill in a form, name, address, phone number, email, and all that kind of stuff. submit it, and they will issue you an FRN number. I think it's a 7 or a 10-digit number or something like that. So you want to keep that number someplace where you can find it, because when you go back to in your account, you have to have that number to do it. It's kind of like your new username. When you set up an account, you have a username. Well, that FRN number is your username. So this week, I would like for you to each get your FRN number so that you can get ready to take the test, so that when you do take the test, it'll already be there. And the FRN number, it's good for a year with no activity. I mean, if it goes a whole year and you never do anything, well, they'll eventually drop it. But so you've got a year to get your license and get all that taken care of. So I'm going to show you how to do that. You're going to go into a website. It's called fcc.org. Let's see, where is it? Okay. Well, they don't show it here. But anyway, it's fcc.org. Oh, no, I'm sorry. No, that is not correct. It's fcc.gov, G-O-V. Okay. So when you, and it should take you to a page that looks kind of like this. This page changes from time to time, but when you get to this part, you're going to go down to this right here. That's called ULS. That's Universal Licensing System. And you click on that, and it's going to take you to, there it is right there. And it's going to take you to a page that looks kind of like this. And you're going to click on the one that says register. So you're going to get registered and create an FRN number. And once you click on this, it's going to take you to a page that looks kind of like this. And again, you're going to click on the one that says register and get an FRN number. So once you click on that, it's going to take you to a form, and you fill in all the information, your name, address, phone number, email, and all that kind of stuff. And then you submit it. And then they will, I think they issue the FRN number almost immediately. As soon as you get the form filled out, you push go, and there's your FRN number right there. So make sure you write that down, keep it someplace where you can get to it, because you will need it when you take the test. Okay, so that's not your license, that's just your account. You're just setting up an account with where your license will go. Okay, if you already have a license, I know that some people have a GMRS license. Okay, if you have that, you already have an FRN number, because your GMRS license will be under an FRN number. So don't create a new one, use the same one. Just make sure you know what it is. So you can put both your GMRS license and your ham radio license in the same FRN. I know there's a couple people that have that. Okay, now the second thing I'd like for you to do is go ahead and schedule your test date. This class will be finished, let's see. Go to the, I would say anytime after about the 22nd or the 29th of May. Go ahead and schedule your test date. Now, I've had a lot of people who will come to class 2 or 3 or 4 times. They go home, take the test, and they're done. They got their license, and I don't see them again. And that's okay. I'm grateful for that. If you have the ability to do that. This class is not required. It's just a help. It's just there to help you to be able to pass the test. So if you can read the rest of the book and go take the test, you're one step ahead of everybody else. So these are some of the places in this area in North Idaho and Eastern Washington where you can schedule a test. But you want to schedule it in advance, because most of them are restricted to how many they can have. Some can only do 6 or 7 at a time. And if you wait too long, the class will fill up, and then you're going to have to schedule it farther out. So at least get it on the books. And then if you want to take your test early, you might be able to bump it up, say, hey, I'm ready to take the test. Can I do it this week or next week? And a lot of times they can get you in. So go ahead and get that done. If you live in Kootenai County in North Idaho, you can go to the website called k7id.org, and there's a place there where you could schedule the testing. This is in the Spokane area. Fellow by the name of Glenn. Here's his phone number, and here's his email address. Also, the Kabara Amateur Radio Club over in the Spokane area, they do testing. In the Colville area, if you're up in the north of Spokane, you can go to this email address right here and schedule for a test date. Now also, there's another study help that I highly recommended. There's a place called hamstudy.org. It's a website, it's a ham radio website, and they will actually administer a practice test. So you can go in and take a test and see how you're doing, see how your score is. And I would really encourage you to start taking the test right away. Start taking the practice test even this week, even before we get into the class. And you'll watch as your scores gradually get better and better as you go along. Now what you've got to do is when you go into there, you need to register with the username and password. That way it will remember what test you had the last time. So it'll give you a new test every time. If you don't register, you're going to get the same test over and over again. So I would really encourage to go to that hamstudy.org and start taking practice tests every week, at least one. I've had some people do it 2 or 3 or 4 times in a week. They're really serious and want to get it done. Okay, now each week I'm going to give you a homework assignment. Now today I've given you a couple things that aren't in the book, but once we get into the book, I'm going to have you read a chapter every week. And let's see. And I'm going to do things a little weird, and I'll explain why. For the first week, if you want to just read chapter 1, that's just a welcome, just an opening, kind of a starting thing. And then if you skip down to the very last chapter, this is on safety. And safety is pretty much common sense stuff. Don't stick your finger in the light socket. Don't grab onto antennas while you're transmitting and that kind of stuff. So if you want to read those 2 chapters, and then once we start the class, I'm going to have you start in the back of the book, and you're going to go to chapter 8, and then the following week, chapter 7 and chapter 6 and so forth. The reason for that is chapter 8 and 7 and even 6, that's all rules and regulations. So you can go ahead and get started on that. Communication with other people, radio equipment. So this is all stuff you can kind of do on your own. Now I'm going to be going over the technical part, which is the first 2 chapters. So hopefully by the time you get from here all the way up to here, we will have gone through all the technical stuff, and hopefully it'll make more sense to you. So I know it's weird, but I'm going to have you start at the back. Whoops.
Dale, what was that website?
For the ham study, hamstudy.org. Is that the one?
Yes.
Yeah, right there. hamstudy.org. They have an excellent program. They even have flashcards. They have some other tools that are really useful.
No, it's the website for the other one where you go to the different chapters.
To the different chapters. Okay.
That's it.
Oh, this is actually in your book. These are the chapters in your book. So starting next week, we're going to have you read a chapter a week, and I'm going to have you start at the last chapter, and you're going to work your way forward. Okay? But meanwhile, I'm going to be teaching mostly what's in the first 2 chapters, and hopefully by the time you get there, it'll make sense to you. Okay? And as was mentioned in the video, the astronauts love to talk on the ham radio, and they do it quite often. Nothing more exciting than talking to somebody on the ISS International Space Station. They like to do that, and they do it quite often. There's actually a particular channel that they use. I'm not sure which one it is, but we could probably look it up and find out. Okay, well, that's all we have for this week. Sorry for the late start, and confusion, but hopefully next week will go a lot quicker and easier. Okay, any questions, any concerns, or?
Yeah, Dale, Jeff Coder here. So you talked about that you were going to send like an email that would have the question pool of the 600 questions for
Yes.
yeah.
Uh.
And so I'm just kind of doing this as a refresher to get my brain working. So at some point, go take my general license.
Oh, okay. Uh-huh.
And so I'm wondering, is there somewhere where I can get a copy of the question pool for the general?
Sure.
As well. Okay.
You can go to any of the ham radio websites. They have it, probably arrl.org, and you can download it from there. QRZ.com also has it. I think there's a couple others that have it too. The one in the ARRL website is kind of hard to find, so I just do a search. I'll go up in the search box in the corner and just type question pool for technician or question pool for general, and it'll take you right there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you everybody for coming.
Dale,
Whoops.
do you want us just to read chapter 9 or 9, 8, 7? How far?
Oh, just read the first chapter, which is just the introduction, and then chapter 9, which is safety.
Roger.
And then next week we're going to start with 8 and 7 and 6 and so forth. So
Dale,
we'll do one
and we're
chapter
going-
per week.
Dale, we're gonna start at 7 o'clock next week.
Yeah, the class actually starts at 7 o'clock, but I will start the Zoom meeting at about 6:15. So that way you have about 45 minutes to get logged in and set up.
Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for coming.
I've got a
Dale-
quick,
Dale, I have a question.
Yes,
This is Donna. There are a question pool in the back of the license manual.
yes,
Is
there
that
is.
the entire pool or is that just a limited number of questions?
Nope, that's the entire pool. You
Okay,
should,
thank you.
yeah, you have the whole thing. The reason that I send you a downloaded copy is if you want to print it, then you can mark it all up, scratch it up, and not have to mark up your book.
Thank you.
But yeah, it's the same thing. It's the same as what's in the back of your book.
I've got a quick
Dale?
question.
Yes.
Is the 5th edition ham radio license manual, does that have all the information you would need to get all 3 exams done?
No, that one's specific for the technician.
Okay,
There's 3 different manuals. There's one for the technician, one for the general, and one for the extra.
okay, thank you.
Okay.
Dale, how often do you have to retest for these? Is it for life or?
Actually, you never have to retest as long as you don't let your license lapse. You have to renew it every 10 years. But if you do it before it expires, you just simply renew it. That's all there is to it. No
Okay.
test required.
What does it cost for renewal and that kind of thing? Is
It's-
it like
It's $35.
a year?
No, just for well, it's $35 to get your license in the first place. And then every time you renew it, it's another $35.
And the renewal is required
Over 10 years.
Yeah, every 10 years.
every 10 years. I missed that part.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Now you do have to be careful on that because they do not send you a reminder. You just need to check it. I make it a practice is on New Year's Day, every year, check my license, make sure it's not going to expire this year. Okay, anything else?
How
Is
much
there an-
different is version 5 of the book compared to
Ac-
3 or 4?
Actually, the book itself, there's very little difference at all. In fact, I've never found any difference. The only thing that's different is the question pool. So if you have an older book like version 4, you can use the book. It's the same book, but just use the current question pool.
Is there an age limit? How young can you be and get a license?
As long as you can pass the test, that's the only requirement. I think the youngest person that I have had in my class was 10 years old. But I did hear there was a young man that was 8 years old that I've heard him on the radio before. Cute little guy. But Now, there's no age limit as long as they can pass the test. That's the only requirement.
I think the 8-year-old was up in Sagal, if I'm not mistaken, because
Yeah,
he got it like he got it the day right at his 8th birthday.
Yep. Yeah, it's yeah, I used to hear him all the time, but I haven't heard him recently. Oop, looks like are we still working?
I can hear you. Dale, just a quick comment as to the licensing. I had a license and unfortunately during the time of our moving up to the house we're at now, it had passed and I was not able to find the information until after my license had expired.
Oh, okay.
My intent is to request my previous license after I pass.
Well, what you can do is if your license expires, then you have to take the test again and get a new license. But once you get the new license, if you want to apply for your old license, your old call sign as a vanity, you can do that if it's still available.
And it was as of last week, still under my name. So, yeah.
Yeah, so if it's available, you can apply for it. But you have to get the current FCC license first.
Correct.
Okay, I don't know what this is. Something popped up here. Okay, just got something came up on my screen. I don't know what it is.
Do you just still want to record, or do you want to stop recording?
Okay, yeah, if I can figure out how to get this. Oops. Video panel. Okay. Now let's see. Let's I think I can. There we go. Okay.